So hopefully there isn't a fence between us and industry and academia. We do try to build bridges, not walls. Thanks very much for being here. Well done. It's Armageddon out there, isn't it? I've even heard of some people having to resort to using buses. It's almost like it's a conspiracy to turn us into proper Europeans, but anyway. So, first, last time I was here, I quite enjoyed talking here because it's quite a cozy little room. I had a little audience participation survey. So I'd like you to stick your hand up if you're a data scientist of some sort. Few. Some sort. Would you label yourself as a data scientist? What about geoscientists? No. And of those, who are geophysicists? Okay. And petrophysicists? One. We need more. And how many of you work in the oil and gas industry? A few. Good. Well, that's great. So hopefully what I'm going to talk about is going to be relevant to quite a few of you. Even if you don't work in the oil and gas industry, I think there's a lot you can take from the data sets that have been built up over many decades. A lot of those data sets sit in CDA at the moment, so Dan's going to talk to you later about that, and they've been custodians of that data for quite a while, but there are some changes afoot, which Dan will talk a little bit about, and I'll mention very briefly. I'll firstly start off with a slide on the industrial strategy for the UK. I don't know how much Steve Garrett talked about this yesterday. And I'm not going to talk that much about it, but I mean, you can see up there that there is a strategy that's been published. It's on the base website. You can go and download it. It's basically about trying to keep the UK productive, competitive, trying to keep innovation live in the UK, trying to attract investment. And there have been some grand challenges set out as a result of this. So these 4 grand challenges on here, one of those is AI and the data economy. And there's a certain amount of interrelationship between these things. So for example, how can AI help an aging society? That's a big challenge for the UK. And I pulled out a couple of things from there. So one on data. So we do have world-class data. We have a lot of geospatial data that sits in lots of different places at the moment for various historical reasons. One of the things the government's trying to do is put together a geospatial data commission, so try and pull that data out of places like, BGS, Met Office, from the Ordnance Survey, pull it together into a single resource. And I guess, the oil and gas industry is no different. We have lots and lots of geospatial data that we need to pull together and then try and maximize the value of it. Sometimes the value comes from tying disparate data sources together. So geophysical data is now being used for the offshore wind industry, for example. So it's really critical that we get this data together and make it available for everyone. And then one other thing on there is the AI sector deal. So AI is definitely an area where UK does have an edge at the moment. We want to try and stay in front there. There's a relatively large investment into the AI sector, so £232 billion is the value to the economy, and money's going into that sector deal. And then we've got a number of other deals. So Steve Roberts may talk about this a bit later. So there's an Aberdeen City deal, part of which is the Oil and Gas Technology Centre, and then potentially there's a future oil and gas sector deal as well. So I'll talk a bit about the UK regulatory framework, so very, very briefly. So what's the role of the Oil and Gas Authority in all of this? So our role is to maximise recovery of petroleum from UK waters. We have not just regulatory role, so effective stewardship, which involves stewardship of data, but promoting the UK, promoting investment into the industry, promoting activity, and then trying to influence what goes on, so really trying to encourage collaboration. And that's one of the key areas that we're working in at the moment, is getting companies, academia, funders all to work together to meet that central obligation of maximising recovery. And the approach is backed up by a strategy, but also we have a number of powers in different areas, one of which is highlighted in orange there is information and samples. So we have made some changes to information and samples regulations, partly through the Energy Act. There will also be some changes coming in terms of release of data sets. So the general idea is to try and shorten the timescales on which data is acquired and then released out into the public domain, but also try and broaden the data sets that are made available to industry and the general public. I've got a license timeline up there. Why is that relevant, you might say? Well, at various stages of a petroleum license, there are various decision points and data is collected and it should be handed over to us at those decision points and at the ends of those licenses. So that happens to a certain extent at the moment. We're trying to improve the data that we get from operators that we can then push back out to recycle opportunities. And then I'll talk a little bit later also about licensing rounds and how data relates to those. So we're trying to strike a balance between carrots and sticks, trying to get industry to do the right things. You can see on there, in terms of our powers, strategic use of data is one of the foundations. But then on the right-hand side, one of the rewards is transparency and better data access. So if we do the right things, there'll be more transparency, more data put out. And then in terms of the fiscal regime as well, there have been some measures which are particularly pertinent to data sets that are put into industry's hands. So on the top left-hand side there, money has been put directly into acquiring new data sets. So £40 million for geophysical surveys, and then we have a pot of £5 million which will be used for various regional studies this year. And I'll mention that again later near the end. But essentially, all of these changes together, they increase the feeling that the UK is a place to do business, a place to invest. Tax rates have come down. Companies are now recognising that although perhaps we don't have the biggest prospects in exploration terms, and we have mature fields, actually those fields and those prospects can deliver a massive amount of value. So the volumes may not be big, but the value is actually significant. I was told the other day that somebody asked some Norwegian petroleum economists to do some calculations on a UK prospect, and they couldn't believe the numbers that came out because it was so good. So the UK compared to Norway, they're just completely different worlds. You need to go and educate your petroleum economists around the world and tell them what a great place this is. Get them to run the calculations, and then they'll see for themselves that this is a place to be putting your money. In terms of what's left to find, there's some creaming curves there. You can see they're all going up to greater or lesser degrees. We will be putting out a report near the end of the year with a supplementary pack of information early next year on a revised yet-to-find calculation for the UK. So we're changing the methodology of how we calculate what is left to be found in the basin. We're cleaning up the prospect inventory. So the prospect inventory has been stewarded by the British Geological Survey for more than 40 years now. So they have a big data set of various opportunities that have been identified by companies over the years. And we're going through that now, looking at prospects that we want to obviously put to one side and other prospects that we need to push forwards. And then we'll be extending those yet-to-find calculations into unmapped areas of the UKCS. So what are the frontier areas that we think have some potential? So Ogier has spent quite a lot of time and effort over the last 2 years trying to remove barriers to investment. You can see all the barriers that have been noted on the top of this slide here. The one on the left-hand side is access to data. So we're going to change the way data is reported to us. We're going to change the way that data is disclosed to us, and we're going to set up a national data repository to try and remove some of those barriers. On the below-ground measures, you can see there are quite a few of those are related to data in one form or another. So application of geophysical technologies and geophysical data, trying to release data under an open government license. So the open government license basically means you can pick up those data sets and do anything you like with them. You can even turn them into commercial products and resell the data if you want to. So that's really to try and stimulate business and academic activity. We're starting to move more into machine learning. Big data is something I would say we've been doing as an industry in one way or another, depending on how you define it, for quite a long time. And there are things that maybe other industries can even learn from us on how to handle big data sets. And then we've got some other things on there to do with reducing well costs. Obviously, we need data for that. Portfolio discipline, you need to understand your portfolio. And then looking at wells that have been drilled, either historically or wells that are going to be drilled, and seeing what we can learn from them, using them as analogues, and trying to get that basic science right. And then on the right-hand side there, skills retention and development is a key area for us. Lots and lots of changes in industry, and also how we then relate in the carbon transition to low-carbon industries. So this is particularly relevant at the moment in areas like the southern North Sea, where companies are using gas-to-wire concepts. So it's essentially taking small volumes of gas offshore in the southern North Sea, generating electricity from them with a turbine offshore and sending it down the power network with the wind turbines. So information management, 3 key areas that we're working in to try and get good quality data sets out to the public and to industry. So one is the UK Energy Portal. That has existed for quite a long time. It has some great functionality. There are some things that we will change as it goes through time. So we use it for things like collecting data from industry through various surveys. We use it for consenting. We use it for license applications. So that's well established. The Ogier data center sits on our website at the moment. This is something that we've developed relatively recently, so added new functionality to it. So you can get some basic data sets there, license data, well data, field data. And then really very much for the next few years is how to build the national data repository. So trying to establish the methods and the ways that we get the data out into that. And critical to it is obviously how we obtain the historical data, how we obtain information, samples, records, and pull them all together from the various disparate sources that currently exist. So Dan will talk a little bit more about this later. And then allied very much with the data is how to leverage technology. So the overall picture is there's a technology leadership board. So Steve spoke to you yesterday. Steve's on that technology leadership board. They help set strategic priorities for the industry and themes, try and tie together industry, the OGA as a regulator, government, academia, and then push it through the Oil and Gas Technology Centre. So taking those themes, trying to get some actions out of them. It has government backing, industry participates in that, and the Oil and Gas Authority's role in everything is to really oversee those actions, try and help where we can, holding operators to account and making sure that they do the right things, one of which is putting together technology plans. So we have a number of things at our disposal, tools at our disposal. So one is supporting obligations in the MER strategy. So there is a legal requirement essentially for operators to deploy technologies to try and maximize economic recovery from the North Sea. So they need to consider benefits of technology, which technology should be used. There may be things on the shelf at the moment. There may be technologies that should be developed in the future. That's a legal requirement that that's done. Then we have an expectation that industry also looks at how they develop their technology plans through time. So they need to formulate a technology plan. They should do that on an annual basis, ideally. We also ask when companies apply for a license whether they have a technology plan. And then we also have a technology delivery program for the OGA. So that's available on our website. So that sets out how we work in various domains. So some examples here. So there's a bar chart on the top left-hand side there of some of the responses that we got through a request for information on companies' technology plans. You can see there seismic and exploration is the top bar. So we had a number of responses. The biggest bar on there is probably drilling and operations. So quite a lot of focus is going on drilling technology of one sort or another. And the pie chart on the bottom left-hand side shows the maturity of those technologies. So the deep blue is very mature technologies being used, but the yellow, green, and red are kind of technologies that are being put into practice now. So they're technologies being developed or only recently come into play. And then some examples in the middle of development technologies, so unmanned buoy concepts, versatile production units, subsea storage, and various other initiatives that are going on that Steve will probably mention later in his talk. So I thought I'd mention one of these stewardship expectations. There are 10 of them, but there's one that's particularly relevant, I think, to quite a few people in the room, is stewardship expectation number 3. Which is the optimum use of subsurface data. So we expect joint ventures to have a common data set that they use. So that's to try and avoid misalignment, but also to evaluate regularly whether they're using the best available data sets, the best available technologies, and the best tools that are possible. And really focus on trying to use high quality geophysical data sets. So we've seen the operators that go out and acquire modern seismic data and apply modern processing techniques to that data, and modern workflows in terms of interpretation are the ones that are generating the most opportunities, whether they're exploration opportunities or infill opportunities. So there's a 3 or 4 page booklet on our website which lays out what we expect in terms of that stewardship expectation number 3. There's a summary table on here just to give you a flavour. On the left-hand side, it's how old do we expect the data sets to be in various phases of exploration and production. So we expect that companies will acquire a new seismic data set at least every 8 to 10 years. We expect that companies will consider reprocessing their data sets every 4 years. If companies are using data older than that, then we will challenge them and ask them why. Now, it may be that companies have a valid reason, so it may be that their data is good enough, but we can then perhaps show them examples where companies are using data sets to very good effect, modern data sets in particular. So there needs to be a technical data quality review, we've called it, performed when you apply for a license on an annual basis and at other times when we request it. So some of the Ogier data initiatives, so really the aim here is to drive activity and investment. So data reporting and release, the graph on the right-hand side there shows you a number of downloads through time from April 2016 to near the end of last year. And you can see there's an ongoing increase in that amount of data that gets downloaded. So the appetite for data is increasing all the time. The downward spike on there is Christmas. There are still some downloads on Christmas Day for some reason, so maybe someone in the room needs to look at their priorities in life. And some of the spikes on there are when we release data sets into the public domain, so sometimes there's a big spike because we've dumped a lot of data out, often through the CDA system. And there are quite a few publications on our website as well. We've had a consultation recently on time scales for data release. So data release, data retention, data reporting. There will be some regulations laid in Parliament fairly soon. So that will hopefully come into force relatively soon. So within the next 2 to 3 months, there should be some new regulations in force, which mean that we can start in future getting more data into our hands and then push back out again. We've also consulted on how to fund the National Data Repository. So there will be a funding stream that essentially will come through a levy on industry. Everybody should be able to have access to the National Data Repository. There may be some kind of a nominal fee. And we'll try and push data in the meantime out through our website as well. So we've got interactive maps on our website. We've got various reports and other data sets that can be downloaded as well. So just an example of how data can have an impact on licensing. So we released a set of data out. So this was acquired in 2015. So broadband 2D seismic in frontier areas. You can see the purple polygons on here are license applications that were made and licenses that have been awarded, and the lines are where our 2D lines were acquired. And you can see that there are applications in frontier areas where we had not had applications for a very long time. So it did stimulate interest in these parts of the UKCS. And you can see that there's a range of company sizes in there. So there are small companies that would not have had access to data otherwise, but there are also some very, very large companies out there where putting the data out essentially piqued their interest, and they came and had a look in areas where they'd not been active for a number of years. So that's definitely had an impact for us, and we'll be following that up in the 31st round. So little timeline here. I'm not going to go through the details. Essentially, the message is we put out some data sets for the 30th round, so in support of that. So we put out undeveloped discovery packs, we put out regional maps in support of that, we changed the licensing system as well, and we also ran things like technology events with the Oil and Gas Technology Centre, and we had a very, very good response in terms of applications in that license round. And then at the end of last year, in November, we released another set of seismic data which is going to support the 31st round, so another frontier round that will launch in the middle of this year. So an example of one of the discovery montages that we put together. So we pulled data together from different sources. This is human generated, and we could only do about 50 of them. If we had a machine to actually pull all of those data sets out of our archives, we probably could have done all of the undeveloped discoveries out there, and there are more than 300 of them. So this was quite a long, laborious process. Along with these summary montages, there were other data sets, again, pushed out through the CDA system. So you could go in and you could download release seismic data, you could download well data to supplement this. But there is a wealth of data sitting in our archives, and if we can have an efficient way of pulling out all the relevant bits, it would, I think, help everybody fantastically. So we don't know a lot of what's sitting in our archives. And an example of the first set of regional maps that we put out. So the aim is to cover the whole of the offshore area of the UK with a basic set of maps that industry can then pick up and start working with. So there are depth grids in there, there's analysis of well data, there's some really fundamental stuff in there, so stratigraphic framework charts, petroleum systems events charts, which people seem to have forgotten about. So in our license applications, out of all of the companies that have applied for licenses, so 96 or so applications, I've seen 2 petroleum systems charts. So it's something that's kind of dropped off, and it is still relevant in mature basins. So there's a summary of the stats for the 30th round. So 96 applications, 239 blocks, 68 companies. The thing to keep your eye on now is this frontier round. So we've released the data. That's in the public domain. Hopefully operators are looking at that data. We will announce the 31st round in the middle of the year. Then there'll be 120 days for evaluation of that data, and applications will close probably October, November of this year, and then we'll make awards in those frontier areas next year. So the areas on offer will be basically all the frontier areas, so Mid-North Sea High and Rockall, as before. We've acquired some data on the East Shetland platform up here, which is very interesting from a source rock point of view. So we think there is another source rock that's mature there and is expelling hydrocarbons. And then data sets all the way down through the English Channel, across the Wessex Basin, out into the southwest approaches, into the Celtic Sea, up into Cardigan Bay, and then all the way up through to through the west coast of Scotland there. So a couple of examples of seismic lines there. So it's broadband data. The field tapes are available. So if you want a set of field tapes to play with, you can buy them at a very reasonable fee, I think, if you're a company. And if you're an academic institution, we also have a big suitcase with a NAS drive, and we will send that to you so you can download it to somewhere else and start using it, and then return the drive to us, hopefully. So there's some leaflets which are sitting out on the table out there. So there's a map, there's a basic summary of the information, where to get it, so ukoilandgasdata.com. And then we've also got some regional reports. that have been generated for us by a number of different companies. So Frogtech, IGI, GTech, and the BGS as well. And there's also data in UCOGL. So we've got some onshore data that we reprocessed as well to varying levels of success. So I thought I'd step back a little bit in the last 10 minutes or so of the talk and look at strategic data solutions. So data-driven portfolio efficiency, I've called this. So it's really what are our problems in industry as we see it as a regulator, and what can be done in terms of applying data to try and solve some of these issues. So trying to ape the industrial strategy in some ways, I've called this UK exploration's grand challenges. So one, industry's not doing enough to fill the opportunity funnel. So what we need to do is quantify what's left to be found, but also generate new prospects and plays. And companies are doing this when they acquire new data, particularly. Trying to get companies to focus on value rather than volume. So the fiscal regime is attractive even for small volume targets, particularly if they sit near infrastructure. Technical stewardship, application of quality modern data, and then applying new digital technologies, including machine learning. So essentially what we're doing in the UK in terms of regulation is trying to push things through the opportunity funnel. So you have opportunities, which are these blobs on this funnel, varying levels of maturity. So it goes from new plays, so ideas that you may have, through to leads, which is, well, I think there's something there that I can map on one seismic line, and maybe we need to look at it a bit more, to prospects, to drillable prospects, and then to discoveries. And as you push things through this funnel, things will drop out. You'll realize, actually, that's a really bad idea, and we don't want to drill that. But if you're not putting things in at the front end here, you're not going to get much out of the end here. And we have a real problem in industry of not generating enough of these things here. So new play concepts. New leads, which we can then turn into a prospect portfolio that we can select from. And we also have a problem with pace. So it's pushing things through this funnel. So we have aging infrastructure. Many parts of the UK have facilities that will come offline in the next decade. And so we really need to tackle some of those exploration and appraisal opportunities quickly. So how can we increase the pace of exploration, and how can we increase the number of opportunities that get pushed in at the front end there? And we've got to tackle those challenges in a context of financial capital constraint and human resource constraint. So there are far fewer people in industry, particularly in terms of geoscientists, than there used to be. And so digital technologies can offer us potential to change the game here, so to speed things up, create more opportunities, and become more efficient. This is our licensing framework. So we basically have licenses that are structured in different phases in the initial term. So that's the exploration term. We need to push opportunities through that quickly, get them through field development quickly, an approved field development plan, and then push them through into production. So with decommissioning sitting there on the horizon, it's a real killer in terms of your projects. If you're proposing to drill a prospect and you're not going to bring it online for another 15 years and the facility's not going to be there, well, you're kind of stuck unless you can speed it up and do it in 5 years instead of the 10 years that you're proposing. So we need to identify time in our schedules. So every license should have a schedule, a work program. Where can we speed up what we're doing there? So how can we do things more quickly? So one of the things that we see commonly is it takes 18 or more months to acquire a seismic survey and process that survey and then start interpreting it. I mean, that's an incredible amount of time in relation to the rest of your license time frame. How can we bring that down to a couple of months? Now, I know some processing companies are starting to do that. They're starting to apply new technologies to speed that up, but we need to make sure that everybody's doing it across the board and that we're no longer spending 18 months just processing data and waiting for a result to pop out at the other end. And it's the same for other aspects of the exploration cycle. So your petrophysicist, we have one petrophysicist in the room. Hopefully that's not reflective of the ratio in general industry. Otherwise, we really are stuck, and there's your bottleneck sitting right there. So how can we get computers to help us? We're still going to need this guy to actually train the computers, right? So stick around, don't leave us. But anything we can do to speed up all of those workflows will help. And simple things like a digital assistant. If you could say, right, give me all the wells that penetrate the Carboniferous in the central North Sea. It will bring you up, a small number of wells, but it will bring them up quickly like that, rather than you spending months and months trawling through various bits of well information. So if we can help speed up the cycle time, and if we can standardize some of the tools as well, then that's going to help massively. So working together is going to make some really big improvements here. Another issue we see commonly is geophysical interpretation pitfalls in particular. AI and big data can definitely help in this area. So one, misunderstood amplitude anomalies. Do companies consider alternative scenarios? Sometimes, usually not. Have companies done the basic rock physics analysis? Yes and no. You'd be surprised at how many haven't. Poorly calibrated geophysical models, so make sure you use all available data. Again, this is a problem, and we've seen this in the last year and the previous 5 to 10 years of issues in these areas. Highlight data that doesn't fit the model, so humans are very bad at this. Oh, that doesn't fit my model, I'll put it to one side and ignore it, and I'll carry on with my nice prospect. We need to make sure that that gets raised at an early stage and actually gets looked at in an honest way. Amplitude anomalies are not evaluated and risked in a systematic manner, so more use of risk evaluation tools and workflows, so trying to keep us honest. And then organizational culture. So one trend we've seen is where companies have a single geophysical expert, and that expert is the guru. And nobody understands what the guru is talking about, but for some reason they believe everything he says. And guess what happens at the end? You have a dry well. He says, well, I'll eat my hat, right? And someone actually said to me the other day, they said, we had a geophysicist working in Africa, and he said he would eat his hat if this particular amplitude anomaly was not a gas-filled sand. And guess what? It wasn't a gas-filled sand. So it was a shale density contrast. And so he did actually eat his hat. They chopped it up into pieces and they made him eat it. So beware if you're a geophysicist and you're making those claims. There are things out there that will surprise you. So can AI help to eliminate bias and improve success rates, improve predictive accuracy? Can it help with all those things on the left-hand side? You bet. You can think of uses of a computer to try and resolve all of those issues there. Can big data quickly identify appropriate analogs and provide reality checks? So the analogs you're using may not be related to the basin you're working in, but they may be very, very relevant. How do you pull that information out? So if you look at global data sets that we can use, there's a massive amount of information potentially there that could be relevant. And then how do we tackle the portfolio? So there's a plot here of risk against expected return and all the prospects in the portfolio. At the moment, we're picking things that are maybe not on this efficient frontier here. We need to get the prospects that are going to make the biggest difference, support production in our existing hubs, generate revenue, and help support the economy. I'll just say about Apache, they've been applying good quality data sets, acquiring on a regular basis new seismic data. I think if you look at what they've been doing, you can see the success that they've been having around the Beryl area and around Forties. There's a well drilling at the moment into this fault block here. This was a prospect that had not been identified a few years ago. It's a completely new prospect as a result of acquiring modern 3D broadband data. This is the 2,500th exploration well in the UK. So hopefully it's successful. We'll probably know in a couple of weeks. And then some examples of where processing technology and improvements can help. So this Kirchhoff migration versus GRT technique. This is much better at preserving the amplitudes. this is much better at looking at some of the geometries within the data as well, particularly when you're looking for stratigraphic traps. You can maybe not see it too well on here, but some of these on-laps here, we've had companies coming in and raving to us saying, oh, well, we weren't sure if there was an on-lap, and now we've gone through the GRT technique. Actually, we know there's an on-lap event there, and we know that there's a valid prospect, and we're going to drill it. And it can help. You probably can't see it very well on this this projector, but the sand channels picked out on here are much better than on the Kirchhoff migration on the left-hand side there. So improvements in processing techniques. So just to wrap up now, some collaborative projects that you can get involved with. So changes coming. I like this quote from the guys at Agile. Who follows the Agile blog? If you don't, you should. So one of their things is be a part of it or be a victim. So you can either get on board or you can be consumed by it. So petroleum systems projects, we've had a number of these. So initially they're regional, thematically focused. Then they were supporting government seismic programs. And now we're moving to a model where we're looking holistically at the UKCS. We're trying to build up the data sets and apply technologies to them. So open data, machine learning. This lays out petroleum systems project, so a 4-year project, collaborating together, rolling delivery tied to license rounds, trying to open up data sets and use machine learning. There's a whole bunch of deliverables here, some of which are data focused, some of which may include putting out code of various sorts to you, and learnings, maps, all those other good things that you like. And so to kick this off, we put some of our own money in to kickstart a database. OGTC are kicking off a machine learning pilot, and then we're hoping that industry will come on board and fund the following 3 years. So there'll be a geoscience stream, there'll be a digital stream. We'll go from a kind of government seed funding to an industry-funded model, and then deliverables will come out through the National Data Repository, and hopefully we'll also have some academic partnerships involved in that too. So we've put some money on the table. If you're interested, this is relevant not just to UK companies, but if you're a non-UK entity, I think you can get a massive amount of value out of this. Then email Joe Bagley, the Oil and Gas Authority. I can give you your email address later if you want. So we want to know, are you interested first of all, and then we'll work out how many participants do we have and how can we share the costs of that project. And Steve may mention this later, we've got a machine learning project that's kicking off in the Northern North Sea, and allied to that machine learning project, which is a cross-border initiative, so it's UK and the NPD is collaborating on that. We're also planning with OGTC some training for geoscientists, so some of the great open source tools that are out there to be used and applied. So we've got some guys in our office who are playing around with these now. So hopefully there'll be some training offered out to industry. And then a final word on data visualization. Just to make you aware, we've put some money into a visualization centre. So that's on the Heriot-Watt University campus up in Edinburgh. It's a collaborative initiative between Heriot-Watt, BGS and the Ogier. So it's a 7-metre wide screen. You can put your goggles on and see everything in spectacular 3D floating in front of you. This is an open access facility. You can all use it. If you want to go on your virtual field trips, you can use this facility. If you want to use it for partner meetings, whatever, it's there to be used. So key messages, OGA supporting industry through existing and new regulations. Data is increasingly driving E&A activity on the UKCS. Big data and analytics must be used to pick up the pace of exploration activity. And we think collaborative data science efforts will underpin this improved efficiency. So thank you very much.